What I'm about to show you right now is hands down the cheapest, the strongest, therefore the best. I mean, what are the other two? What other criteria are there? And also, I don't know about easiest, but no, it's not easiest because there's some welding involved. So it is on par with, if you are considering a 5-lug swap and you want good brakes and you want coilovers, this is the only thing you should ever bother considering, unless you are stuck with 15-inch wheels. You can, with this setup, use 16-inch wheels, so keep that in mind if you want to do a 16-inch wheel, because you can hardly find nothing wide and short in a 15-inch wheel anymore anyway. So 16 is the way you want to go. Now let me show you what's going on here. A typical coilover swap for these 240 Datsuns is going to run you $800 on the minimum. I mean, you might be able to get away with some for $400 or $500, but it requires welding, sectioning of the strut, and then you're still stuck with, actually, contrary to popular belief, the stock brakes on these things are amazing. I've had it well over 100 and no issues with braking, even with my booster completely disconnected. So while the stock brakes are adequate for stock applications, this is far from stock, and it's going to get even crazier once I have the platform built. So let me show you what is exactly going on. Now, currently it's a left-hand drive model, factory rack and pinion, and that's where it ends. I already sold my struts, everything. Now, these are Dodge Neon coilovers. The springs are the wrong rate, but if you talk to BC Racing and wanted the guy get some high-end coilovers, you could. I just went with low end so I can get it all mechanically aligned and everything worked out, and then I'm going to choose the spring rate which is best for me, right? So these are 2014 Mustang spindles. The bottom hole lines up and it is a 1/2 inch too narrow right here at this point, which allows you to use 2 1/4 inch plates. Now I haven't fully welded everything yet. This is just, I guess, a sort of a mock-up. I still have to weld some things. Now, if you use the bottom hole to line up, the top hole you could plug weld to these adapter plates, which are quite easily made, and you're still gonna have to stitch weld right here for a little bit of strength. The bottom hole will go all through, so you're gonna have basically 1/4 inch plate on this side, 1/4 inch plate on this side, and the top bolt will then have the proper spacing that it needs. You can then slot it, whatever. This is just my prototype, so I didn't slot it because the camber turned out to be just a little bit on the negative side, so it was just right. Not too crazy, but you know, where I wanted it to be. The trick with this is you're gonna have to weld a 2014 Mustang control arm tip to the factory control arms on the 240Z. That is the welding that's required aside from this strut right here. Honestly, if you're gonna weld a coilover, might as well weld this. Now, as you can see right here, right where my finger is, I don't have a ruler to show you, but roughly what this does on a 240Z, the tie rod ends are directly parallel or directly in line with the ball joint. On this, they're offset by 3/4 inch to the outside per side. So when I assembled this using the stock rack, I had a lot of toe in, which brings me to the next thing. With toe in, you can actually use the WRX rack and S80 Volvo inners with Techno Toy Tuning outers, or I think Apex, they sell a nice set too. Techno Tuning uses aluminum sleeves, Apex uses steel, so you can make your own choices based on whatever you think is best. You can't go wrong with either one. Apex, however, uses a taper. So the Mustang taper and the 240Z taper is the same. Difference is the Mustang is bigger overall, so you cannot use your stock rack tie rod ends because they bottom out, allowing absolutely no ball deflection. And that's with the rubber removed. With the rubber in place, you're just not going to get any movement at all. You could sleeve it, but then your geometry won't be quite spot on because of this 3/4 inch offset. Now, as far as verticals go, right? Because there's a lot of On lowered Z's, there's a lot of adjustment that you're going to want with the control arms because of the way they move. Roll center and other things get affected, and you get bump steer whenever you lower a Z really bad, which is why a lot of people sell spacers, which effectively turns the stock 240Z strut into a drop spindle. Comparing the center line of the axle from the ball joint on the control arm, on a Mustang it's about 1.5 inches higher, meaning at lowered ride height you're going to experience the same, if the center of the steering rack is there, which is, I'm going to keep it there, you're going to experience the same steering geometry as you would with a 240Z that has the bump steer spacers or whatever you want to call them. So that's a positive, because then, you know, your suspension geometry is the same. Now, what a lot of guys have done just to get power steering on their 240Zs is they use a WRX rack. You cannot use a STI rack because the tie rods are different on the inners, but they use a WRX rack, Volvo S80 inners with, again, either factory 240Z outers or Techno Toy Tuning or Apex engineered or engineering, not sure which one, but anyways, I went with Techno Toy Tuning. Reason is they come with a 5/8 drill bit and there's no taper to it. See, it's just straight 5/8. What that allows you to do is for sure be able to drill this out to 5/8 and then use basically 240Z stock-ish. And then they come with spacers. You can space them out any which way you like. So, big plus. Now, I measured my unmodified rack from outer tie rod to outer tie rod. Remember, I've put thousands of miles on this car. I've raced it. I've road tripped it. I've used it for errands. I've used it for all kinds of stuff. So, I didn't touch my steering rack yet. And it's 46 inches center to center stock. When placed in the Mustang spindle holes, you get a lot of toe in. Now, again, brings me to this point. Volvo inners, Techno Toy Tuning, or factory outers, you're going to be about at the limit of travel of adjustment. So what a lot of guys do, not for the Mustang setup, for stock spindles or stock struts, really is what the 240Z has, right? You're going to be at the absolute limit, which means if you already have toe out, you have no more adjustment, because all the way bottomed out, you're going to be sitting right at 46 inches and 3/4 is what I'm sitting at. But then again, I haven't clearanced this and completely bottomed out this end nor that end, so I have a little bit of play here. And remember, I also have double jam nuts, because the part that I bought, by the way, these inners are $30 each. These jam nuts came with it, and then these jam nuts came with the Techno Toy Tuning outers. So you got a 1/4 inch there, you got a 1/4 inch there, which means completely bottomed out. I'm looking at the exact measurement of what mine was when I drove for thousands of miles with no tire wear. Keep that in mind. So should there be any damage, should your specs be slightly different, you're gonna not be able to adjust any kind of toe in. It's gonna be either neutral or toe out, which I'm not gonna even go into what's better, what's not. I'm not that kind of expert, but you just don't have adjustment for the variances of manufacturing tolerances, whatever, you know, or for adjustable lower control arms, which you may have on stock suspension. So a lot of guys do the Subaru rack to get power steering, but they have to cut the rack. The other thing is pivot to pivot, 240Z, 610 millimeters. This is 650 millimeters, which is important for this conversion. Remember, this kicks out 3/4 inch per side. The inner pivots must also be moved outward to minimize bump steer. Aside from the drop spindle thing on a lower 240Z, that issue is already taken care of by using a 2014 Mustang spindle. The other issue with using a WRX rack, besides the fact that you're practically unable to get any toe in should you want it, I don't know why you would, but should you want it, cannot get it, is at 650 millimeters inner pivot and the stock being 610 millimeters, you're gonna have 40 millimeters, more than 1 inch, that's almost 2 inches, of not stock location for the travel of the tie rod in relation to the control arm, in which equates to bump steer. Here's the other beauty of this. The reason guys are swapping WRX racks in, besides getting power steering, right, and besides this being right here, let me grab my flashlight and show you. Besides that being in a location very similar from center to where that is, right, the center of this and this is roughly 10 inches. And so it is on there as well. Meaning it is practically a drop-in replacement. You might have to clearance the center because it is thicker and because there's hoses. But the hoses are on the front. And I'm just gonna loop mine so that it doesn't damage it, but I'm not gonna run power steering until I do a motor that's much bigger than this one, at least horsepower wise. So you can kind of see why I'm excited about this swap. I don't have to cut it. I don't have to have a machinist thread it and shorten it. My pivots are exactly perfect for these spindles. These spindles are dropped 1.5 inches from factory, meaning a lower 240Z with these spindles then doesn't have the suspension geometry mess ups that you would on any other lowered Z. Tie rods, again, in relation to the control arm, to the height of the tie rod, is spot on stock. But from the tie rod to the center line of the axle, that center line is raised by 1.5 inches, meaning it's a drop spindle. So no, before anybody asks, you cannot use the Subaru WRX rack as a whole, right? What you have there is a Subaru. Obviously, it's been unthreaded to ship to me. I got it from Canada, and it's a right-hand drive rack. But what you got here is just the Subaru WRXs are really, really wide, and the STIs are even wider. But the important thing is the STIs don't have this thread pitch, which means you can't use Volvo inners, which means the Volvo inners won't match up with your 240Z outers, and that's the only way you're going to make this work. So Subaru WRX cannot be an STI. What it can be, though, is it can be a Forester, it can be Impreza, it can be anything except for the one model, because I spent about an hour at a parts store cross-checking different things, physically holding parts in my hand, checking them. It cannot be a Legacy. The Legacies and the STIs share the part number for the inners. Well, not just the part number, they share the thread pitch, meaning can't use the Volvos. So while the STI does come with a cooler rack, I guess, turn to turn and some other stuff, cannot be used. So it has to be Impreza, Forester, or WRX, which is, I think, an Impreza. Anyway, so I got that rack for $250. Give you a parts breakdown. I got those spindles for $50 each. A pair of front coilovers, well, I got all four for $190, so that gives you some idea. $190 for all 4 coilovers. Lower control arms that I had to splice, well, they were another $50 per each, right? So $100 for the pair. Brake rotors were $90. These are Roush rotors. Brake calipers were $90, so $180 for just brakes. And you can use the 11.5, 12.4, 13.2, 14-inch Brembos, 15-inch Brembos. There is a variety of brakes that you can use. It's just your wheel choice will be limited. So yes, I am doing a right-hand drive conversion on this car, which brings back to this other thing. So I am going to be using a 275 millimeter front tire, which means at some point I will most likely be going power steering, which is, again, allowable to me via the WRX rack. If I'd wanted to stay left-hand drive, I could have just bought one from a local parts yard off a Forester and been ahead, but because just I wanted to, there's no real logical reason to it. I wanted to go right-hand drive. This is the perfect car to do it. There's no real inherent value in this car. As you can see, it is a complete rust bucket. I need all kinds of work done on this. So, but before I leave you guys with this, so these are 17-inch wheels. Fronts are gonna be 275s. My rears, for now, are gonna be 315s. I may go wider later. I'm running 11-inch wide wheel on the back, 9.5-inch wide on the front. On the back, the neon coilovers, well, SRT4. I made my own hub plate, whatever you want to call it, and I'm doing a 2000 Mustang diff, and which I should be done with very soon. I already have most of the mounts already set up. Obviously, I have my knuckles. There you go. That's what they're called. I have my knuckles set up. Here's the beauty of it. It's going to be a 2015 Mustang diff. 2015 Mustang axles. You can disassemble them and shorten them for $75 each. The axles themselves are $60 a piece. They are dirt cheap. They are 32 spline outers. They're the exact same diameter and spline count as a turbo Z32 or a twin turbo Z32. The hub is bolt-on. The hub is $75 a piece. And you can then get aftermarket studs, whatever. These are 14 millimeter studs. Or are they? I think they're 14 millimeter because the fronts are actually 1/2 inch, but the backs are 14 millimeter. So it eliminates all your issues with the stub axles and the companion flanges and the super overpriced CV axles, and then still having to pay $1,200 for limited slip. I paid $350 for a nodular iron GT 6-speed Mustang center diff. Well, the whole thing, it's because it's not a 9-inch, there's no center. So the Super 8.8, they come in ratios from a 315 all the way up to a 409. So they're kind of narrow compared to like an 8.8, for example, which goes all the way down to a 273. But I'm running a 331 limited slip nodular iron 33 spline axles. They're not 31 spline axles like you would find in Explorer, nor is it made out of aluminum, although the aluminum is an option if you want to go with a V6 one or an automatic V8. They came in aluminum. So I mean, it's just stupid cheap. And of course, me being dirt poor, that's how I roll. So keep an eye on that. I will be releasing that very shortly. This, I mean, yeah, I know it looks rough, but I'm excited about this. 9.5-inch front wheel, 11.5-inch rear wheel, 275s, 315s. Oh, here's the beauty of it. So with my R200 long nose, a 86 Corvette drive shaft, a Muncie 4-speed or a Turbo 350, the short shaft ones, this is where my V8 sits, right? My steering shaft barely clears, and I mean, I have room. It's not ideal. It's still, you know, mostly kind of sort of mid-engine-ish. Definitely better than a straight 6. But as you can see, I have this much room to move backwards, and that's exactly how much shorter the Super 8.8 is. Meaning, not only the CV axles, the limited slip options, locker, spool, whatever you want. Aftermarket axles up to 2,000 horsepower, $1,400, which is like half the price of CV axles, quality CV axles for a 240Z anyway. So you could have bolt-in motor, bolt-in off-the-shelf 4-speed transmission, which again with a 315 or 331 you could actually do. You don't need overdrive with a mild gear like that. Save you some money. Or you could use a 2-speed power glide and still run a 355, 390, whatever it is you want, you could still do. But in my case, I'm able to move my engine backward, which is not that big a deal. It's a matter of light fabrication. Move the transmission backwards. Utilize a $40 off-the-shelf Corvette drive shaft. Off-the-shelf limited slip. Shortened off-the-shelf axles. With a car that's light, I don't foresee any problems with them. But I do plan in the future of going much higher horsepower, which means I am going to get the custom axles. But again, custom length custom axles are only $100 more than they are to begin with. And the aftermarket for S550 Mustangs is massive. Brakes are cheap. Rear brakes are cheap. The rear brakes I'm going to be using off of 2014, but they do work with the 2015 hub with some clearancing from the inside rotor hat because the offset's a little bit different. But I mean, this is something I'm excited about. I've been working on this for months. I designed it in the basement of the hospital while we were, you know, going through the time of our life with baby Luke and all his surgeries. So, I mean, it is what it is. That's why it took so long. But I have no regrets, and I'm excited to go forward with this project. Now that the lava is subsided in Hawaii, that's what really put me off for 2 months, is I had to go to Hawaii and deal with all the lava there. So it was crazy. Well, those of you who watched this long, stay tuned for updates because I am bolting everything on this week, as well as finishing up the rear. You don't realize just how close I am to finishing up the rear. The differential's already mounted in its cradle. I got to finish the front nose. I'm excited about this. Definitely excited. As soon as I can, I will be doing burnouts galore, road trips, wherever, provided I have time. There are some things that are out of my control. Also some things I cannot tell you about. But, you know, let's just say I may be gone for a while doing things out of my control. And it's just the way it is. If you're that kind of person, you have my chosen, I guess, career, you could call it. Although technically I'm a part-timer, but we still go other places. So that's exactly what's happening. Can't tell you when, but I'm happy. It's just I'm trying to get as much done as possible before that happens. So keep that in mind. All right, guys, take it easy and stay safe out there.